Welcome to the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screener College Basketball Podcast. You could have been anywhere else in the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. Hope everybody's staying safe out there. Hope you're finding a little calm. Hope everybody's healthy, strong, and solid. Let's all wipe the tear away from our faces that there's no college basketball to consume, but then throw that tissue away and then please go wash your hands. I think that's the proper and appropriate thing to do. What we're trying to do here for the college basketball fan is just give you a little recap, a little rewind, take a look at some of the great programs and great seasons that were cut short this season. One of those is in the America East, the Vermont Catamounts. We were lucky enough to have Jake Marsh, the radio play-by-play voice for the Vermont Catamounts. Please give Jake a follow at Jake Marsh 18, capital J for Jake, capital M for Marsh. You can also find a little bit of Jake's work over at the Pardon My Take podcast over at Barstool Sports. So please be on the lookout and the listen out for that as well. Jake and I got to talk a little Anthony Lamb, talked about his improvement with his basketball IQ. We talked about one of the most powerful moments in college sports, in sports in general, this particular past season with Josh Speidel and senior day for the Catamounts. We talked about Coach Becker, some of the team characteristics and culture that he tried to put in place up there in Burlington. We talked about the development of point guard Stef Smith and how he was nailing it from deep. We talked about the new arena that might be a place to visit up in Burlington. And we talked about the real thing that is the Duncan Influence. Played a little fortune teller of what Vermont might have coming back and talked about a possible player of the year that exists on the roster that you may not know. You want to listen to that part. We talked about visiting a couple places over on Church Street if you get up to Burlington. Always a great place to walk up and down and go for a stroll. If you really like what you're listening to here on the Screener College Basketball Podcast, and enjoying what Mike is doing by taking the charge and taking the lead as far as keeping you guys company when there's no college basketball to consume, please give the podcast a follow over on Twitter at SDS Podcast. Efficiency of keystrokes, of course, and please go say some nice things about Mike. He's been busting his hump and putting a ton of work in and talking to a ton of smart, interesting, intelligent people in the college basketball world. Go say something nice to him over on Twitter at Randall Rant. You like what you're listening to, you got a little extra time on your hands, go ahead and leave a nice, kind review. Kindness is always cool over at your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. Let's get to that conversation with Jake about the Catamounts. Really appreciate Jake's time and his information. Hope everybody stays safe out there. Cheers. Welcome back in, listeners, to the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're still talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus. And today we brought in Jake Marsh to talk some Vermont Catamounts basketball. Jake, how's everything going on your end? Thanks for jumping on the podcast for a few.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Really appreciate it. Would have hoped we're talking about different things at the end of the season, but got to make the most of it, and happy to talk about the Catamounts.
We feel pretty similar in that regard, Jake, and I'm sure the listeners feel pretty similar as well. Just so we're clear, so we can get this out in the open, we've been Catamount fans since DJ Sordenstein canned one of those like Steph Curry, Dame Lillard type three-pointers from range before that was even a viable offensive option for basketball anywhere, and we admired Taylor Coppenrath, who was a cool stretch four before it was cool in the NBA. He averaged 25 points per game, scored over 770 points that season, and scored more points than J.J. Redick did that season for college basketball for the Catamounts. That's insane.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And everyone always remembers the Sorrentine from the parking lot shot, but some people forget that Coppenrath was his right-hand man, and he was just a beast, just tearing up college basketball that season in 2005.
Yeah, he was one of those players that when you looked at his numbers, you're like, wait, who is this again? And then, of course, that iconic shot from Sorenstein with the beautiful announce, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. My co-host, Mike Randall, and I watched that game together, round one, and nearly lost our collective minds. All right, let's bring it back to this past season for the Catamounts. During the Screener season recap series, been lucky enough to have some keyed-in folks like yourself provide some keen observations. So let's just start with your superstar, Anthony Lamb. The forward has had an amazing career as a Catamount. He's one of the players in your conference for a number of seasons now. Jake, educate the listeners. What traits make Lamb such a force?
With Anthony Lamb, there's honestly too many to name because he is one of the best Catamounts to ever play green and gold uniform. There's no doubt about that. He's up there with the Sorrentines, the Coppenraths, the Marcus Blakeleys, things like that. But to answer your question, Anthony Lamb just, especially come playoff time, when he needed to get it done, he got it done. That man was so locked in during the first two games of the America East tournament. It's just like he could flip a switch. And not to say the offside of the switch was off because he was still Anthony Lamb, but when he needed to be on, he was on. You look at St. John's, buzzer beater win. Virginia, first player to score 30 points against Tony Bennett's team. And then in this America East tournament, he just had big play after big play. And with him, it was so unique watching him play, especially in conference where these other teams know him so well, because anytime he touched the ball, especially in the paint, 2, sometimes 3 defenders would come at him, and he would just be bombarded play after play, so it would leave the other guys open. Or sometimes he would just take it himself and still split that double or triple team and take it himself. So his basketball IQ certainly improved this season, and I know some people are saying he didn't have the numbers that would have liked, but when you really look at why the reason is, which is because the other teams have so much respect for him, it kind of explains it better.
Well, I think the 2 illustrations that you put out there, the game-winning shot against St. John's, you saw the double and the triple team. You saw the triple team come, and the double team was there. And then you mentioned the 30 points that he put up against UVA and their vaunted pack line defense. I mean, that just doesn't happen by accident. That happens when you're a superstar like Anthony Lamb. And I can still remember his freshman year when you guys played Purdue in the first round of the NCAA tournament. He's matched up against Biggie Swanigan as a freshman, and he put up 29 and canned 3 threes before he even started shooting threes in round 1 of the tournament. And you guys you gave Purdue an absolute scare in that round.
Oh yeah, they were in that game from start to finish, and one of their seniors actually got hurt in the middle of the game, and he was unable to play in the second half, so it could have been a whole different story. Same thing with Florida State last year. You were tied in the half, and FSU just ended up being too big and too deep, and that's why this season especially, it's really, really a bummer that Catamounts didn't get their chance, because a lot of folks within the program and a lot of folks in the fan base really felt this was the year that they could have broken through and got that win in the tournament.
Just a matter of time until they repeated history, like you mentioned, in 2005. And speaking of seniors, the other emotional moment for your program this year involved the final regular season game against Albany. Senior Josh Speidel found the floor. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that moment and maybe outline the value of that particular basket made by Josh for your program and for Vermont fans everywhere?
Obviously, as you mentioned, if folks don't know the backstory, to building the program for 4 years. Super Bowl Sunday, 2015, it was his senior year of high school. He had already committed to Vermont. He got in an awful, unfortunate, nearly his life, was in a coma for a while. No one knew if he would be able to make it through. A day or two later, Coach John Becker flew out to Indiana, was bedside at the hospital, and he told his parents, no matter what happens, you still have a spot on this team. You still have a full scholarship waiting for you in Burlington, and we're going to help you get through this, and you're still going to be a member of this team. And that's exactly what happened. And fast forward to, like you mentioned, senior night, March 3rd, Coach Becker allowed Josh to dress out, and good sportsmanship by Will Brown of Albany. They allowed him to score UVM's first basket, and then you saw the outreach and what happened after that. It was just a chilling moment. It really meant a lot to Josh, to the program, to college basketball. Definitely one of the best moments in college basketball this season, especially with no postseason to talk about. Saw a bunch of fan-made one shining moments, and Josh's basket was all over that. And it's really great to see, because when the cameras weren't rolling on senior night, Josh is still at practice every day. He's just off to the side getting better on his own. And if you see some of the improvements that he's made personally since that awful car accident, it's really great to see.
And kind of what makes college hoops perfect and really illustrates why our sport is so powerful. That was incredible. Let's play a little fortune teller here. What team characteristics would scare a high major team if they were matched up against your Catamounts in round 1 of the NCAA tournament?
Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of folks felt that all the pieces were aligning. Fate was on the Catamount side, and this was the year they were going to win an NCAA tournament game for the first time. Or I guess I should say second time. They won a first 4 game in 2010, but first time they would advance to the round of 32 since 2005 when they upset Syracuse. So this year the Catamounts were as deep as they've ever been. Coach Becker, when the team was fully healthy, that he would play 9, 10, 11 guys, which is rare to see that many guys playing, especially at the mid-low major level, because you're usually relying on their stars. The Catamounts did have a star in Anthony Lamb, but they also had so many pieces outside of him. And like I mentioned, when he's being doubled and triple teamed, it really wouldn't change a thing because the Catamounts still went 14-2. And so there's the depth that I mentioned. There's the experience because, as we said, Purdue in 2017, FSU in 2019, a lot of these guys had NCAA tournament experience. And especially given that college basketball, as wacky as it was, I don't think the seed really would have mattered this year because if you're playing as a 12 or a 13 against the 4 or a 5, there was so much more parity. And if the Catamounts got that chance, which of course they were one win away of getting into the tournament, I think the mix of the depth, the experience, and the coaching, as John Becker's been there plenty of years, really, really would have put a scare in a high major team.
I think that any team, UVA or any ACC, Pac-12, Big Ten team, one of those reasons they'd be frightened is Stef Smith, your lead guard. How important is a lead guard like Smith, and how much improvement did he display this past season, especially from beyond the arc?
No doubt. And when you are watching or listening to NCAA tournament analysis on any network, most of the time you'll hear someone say that the most important characteristic to winning a game in the tournament or making a run is senior guard leadership. And that's exactly what Stef Smith was. Now, he was a junior last year, but he's been playing significant minutes since his freshman year, which again is pretty rare to have that much playing time throughout the majority of your career. And what Stef Smith really changed in his game this year is he shot the lights out of the ball. He was the most accurate three-point shooter in the America East, hovering around 40-45%. That's something he had last year, but not consistently. He had 6 threes in the America East tournament semifinal last year against Binghamton, but that really surprised everyone. And when he would make 3 or 4 threes in a game this year, it really didn't shock anyone because that's the type of shooter that he changed. And his leadership, along with the rest of the guards, were really important this year, and I think he would have played a major factor in our championship game and potentially the tournament as well.
And you mentioned Coach Becker. We absolutely adore Coach Becker and what he's accomplished up there in Burlington during his time on the bench. 2-part question here, Jake. Why does he stay and not answer the call of a high major like Coach Oates from Buffalo to Alabama or, Shaka from VCU to Texas, etc.? What traits does Coach Becker own that allow the Catamounts to be successful and sustainable in a one big league like the America East season after season?
For sure. To answer the first part about why he's staying, he often tells the media, you can't mess with happiness. You don't want to mess with happiness. And that's exactly what he has in Burlington. He's very happy. He's been there for a very long time. He started as director of operations, assistant coach. He's got his family there. He's had a coaching staff that's all been there by his side since his tenure pretty much began 9 years ago. So he's comfortable there. He's obviously kicked butt there, wins after wins after wins, especially in conference play, and he's scheduling very well. The Catamounts are still getting double-digit wins in non-conference play, so everything has really come together. And not to mention the fact, we haven't even included the fact that UVM is getting a brand new arena in 2 years, the Tarrant Center. So, of course, Patrick Shim's historical and everything, but I think everyone can agree if you've been there or seen it on TV, yeah, UVM could certainly use a more improved arena. And that's exactly what they're going to get there in a few years. He's trying to turn this program into the Gonzaga of the East Coast, quote unquote. And I think he's definitely on his way to doing that. And in terms of why he's successful and sustainable in the one bid league, if you just look at the culture of the team, everyone talks about the winning culture, and that's exactly what Vermont has. This is only my second year part of the program, and since day one and year one, I felt like I meshed in right away just because all the players, coaches, student managers, everybody is on the same page. Everybody is so nice, and everybody wants to win that championship and go to the tournament every single year. So I think that whole mixture formula, whatever you want to call it, is why Vermont was 1 win away from going to 3 tournaments in 4 years in a one-bid league.
And you mentioned the culture, and we'd be remiss if we did not ask about the Duncan influence, quote unquote. Everett and Robin played major minutes this past season for your Catamounts. Can you expand upon the impact of the Duncan family on the Catamount family, both on and off the court? Because they're a major part of the culture that you're speaking of, with 3 brothers playing in the same program at the same time.
Oh, no doubt. And it started back in 2014 when Ernie committed. Ernie was the oldest of the 3. He graduated last year, was a senior on the team that lost to FSU. And he is still living in Burlington. In fact, he's actually been my color guy for some of the radio broadcasts this year. So we're keeping him involved while he may not have any more eligibility. He's still calling games with me like that. And Everett and Robin, Everett 3-pointers down the stretch were humongous. He was as clutch as ever. He may have not had the three-point shooting clip that he may have wanted for his senior year, but he made threes when they mattered down the stretch, especially in big games like Stony Brook and then the UMBC semifinal. And Robin's been great as well. I mentioned the depth of the backcourt for the Catamounts. Robin is a big part of that. Great vocal leader, and the great part about him is even though his brothers are now no longer on the team, he's only a sophomore this year, so he's got 2 more years left. And the Duncan family has been so important to Vermont. If you're not familiar, 3 players on the same team, obviously brothers. So they're from Evansville, Indiana. They're the first trio of brothers to ever play together in an NCAA tournament game. That was last year against Florida State. Just imagine not only just playing in a basketball game together with your brothers, but in March Madness, in the best sporting event in the world. Not biased at all, but yeah, it's just so cool to see how far they've come and how much they've impacted Vermont basketball. Last year on the Catamount roster, there were 5 players from the state of Indiana. So we're with recruiting as well. It just goes a long way.
Catamount success, and it seems like the Duncan influence is for real up there, and we're glad that Robin is going to team up with Stef Smith in that backcourt and be pretty dangerous next year. And speaking of next year, Jake, how about we play a little fortune teller, and how do the prospects look for next year? Do you think that you guys will be, in the running again for another regular season title and then be a factor in the postseason? Talk to the listeners a little bit about what the Catamounts are bringing back as far as next season in the America East.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, they're going to lose 3 starters, Lamb, Everett Duncan, and then the senior grad transfer, Daniel Giddens, who came from Ohio State and Alabama. So 3 starters is tough, but like we mentioned earlier, they're returning the entirety of their backcourt. Stef Smith will be a senior. The Burlington product, Ben Shungu, will be a senior. You have Robin Duncan. And a guy who had his coming out party this entire season, Ryan Davis, a 6'8". He will be a junior from Schaumburg, Illinois. He was the conference's 6th man of the year this year, and he was only a sophomore. And he's been dealing with the injury bug, I guess, for a lot of his freshman year, then down the stretch this year. But if he can stay healthy, he really, really has the chance to be one of, if not the best player in the America East. Now, in terms of the team overall still will be tough losing those 3 starters, but they have already signed a big man coming in as a freshman from Canada as well. And they just signed a Northeastern transfer, Alex Murphy. His brothers played for University of Florida during the Billy Donovan years. That will help a lot as well. And the coaching staff, of course, like we mentioned, Coach Becker knows how to win in the America East. 4 regular season losses in the last 4 years, I want to say. With 5 regular season losses in the last 4 years. He had undefeated in 2017, 1 loss in 2018, and then 2 losses in each of the last 2 years. So 5 regular season losses in 4 years, which is just absurd. So you've got to think, even though you're losing a generational player in Anthony Lamb and Everett Duncan and Daniel Giddens, the team will find a way. And
especially with what you have coming in, if Murphy can shoot anything like his brother did down in Florida, then you're definitely going to have somebody that can stretch the floor. That's for sure. All right, Jake, let's get you out of here on our final 3 T questions. Pretty simple. Tastes. Best craft beer or brewery that's close to Burlington, Vermont that you've had?
I'd say Vermont Pub Brewery right in the middle of Church Street, Burlington. I know it's right around that area. That's always a great one. Anywhere on Church Street is really good, and everyone always hypes up Hetty Topper, which is nice as well.
Let's go across the nation. Who is the one player in the nation from this past season with a last-second possession to win the game with the game on the line?
I'll answer that twice because I have to stay loyal to the program. So if I were to pick a Catamount at first, it would have to be Everett Duncan because he's just been as clutch as ever down the stretch and in big games. But nationally, I think you have to look. I mean, I guess he's still a big man, but Obi Toppin with Dayton just because he was the best player in the country this year. So you want the ball in his hands naturally, type of position you can get.
What have you been listening to while longing for sports to return? What's a music recommendation you can have for the listeners out there?
Music? I've been listening more of podcasts specifically. I have to say the Part of My Take podcast is a very good one, and I highly recommend it. So if you haven't heard of that one, Big Cat, PFT commenter, no bias at all here. They do a great job trying to fill the void without sports, if you know what I mean.
Thanks for jumping on the Screen to Screener College Basketball Podcast, Jake. Thanks for talking some Catamounts with us. hitting the rewind button to talk about the season and maybe looking a little forward into the crystal ball. We hope that spring and the thaw brings health, calm, and some time outside up there in the Green Mountains. Thanks so much, Jake.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it. And hopefully this time next year, Catamounts will be back in the tournament.
Let's hope that happens. Cheers a lot. Grazie.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm addicted to the appetite. It's a seed of the